Well, here's another sad lie that's shown by the YouTuber known as Mr. Imhotep, which Egyptologist 7 is pinned down as being David Imhotep Jones, an old washed up Afrocentric that's been debunked so many times it's not worth even repeating his name. But you can just change it like this a little bit and act like he's all brand new. We've done a few on him so far, and she has also, showing that even his sources don't agree with him whatsoever. In fact, a recent one that I did on him, they actually show the crystal blue-eyed statues of the pyramid building dynasties. And he says, oh, he's just some scribe, just a common scribe, tries to write him off. Then Copper, also another crystal blue-eyed wooden statue. You should write those off too, and that shouldn't be a representative of Egypt at all in his mind. That actually what he likes, well, then he shows a Roman picture burial where they actually have the face recreated on that, and he doesn't like that either. But what he does like is an ambiguous statue, which that was bad enough, and that's all that I knew whenever I did it. But Egyptologist 7, in her Sherlock Holmes ways, figured out, oh wait, that's something that's offered on eBay, and it's a fake in the first place. It's not even a real Egyptian statue. Has the nose knocked off of it and stuff, and blacks will really love that idea because they think they can claim anybody that has the nose knocked off of them like it's some special little thing they have. Yeah, so the question asked here this time is, do Africans have a say in how ancient Egyptians are portrayed? Well, that would probably depend on which Africans you're talking about. Are you talking about the endemic whites of South African Cape? Are you talking about the endemic Caucasians of North Africa? I mean, if so, yes. But what do you think about the Afrikaans in the Cape? I mean, they're in Africa. Do they have a say-so? Do the Caucasian Egyptians that live there to this day have a say-so on what their people look like? Because it seems like you're trying to ask the question on whether or not the locals should have a say-so in what they look like or are portrayed as. He tells you to tell me why in the comments below, and I think that this is a very interesting question because the topic is very complex. Well, actually it's not. And he says we have to talk about it. We need more understanding and communication. And I'm going to see if I can give you an understanding with that idea. Hopefully you've already got the gist of the idea when I ask you about the Caucasian Egyptians, because the Egyptians were always Caucasians. And the people that are wanting to claim this are like Eddie Murphy over here from the famous Michael Jackson video where they wanted to pretend they knew Egypt had existed. He was even portrayed as Ramses at that time, and Ramses is a known pale leucoderm with red hair. It's been tested and confirmed scientifically, but they don't like that idea, and they really like that Eddie Murphy look. I don't think any pharaoh ever had a mustache, but they did have that chin beard situation, but quite often they kept themselves shaved and just had a wig beard in a way. Just for the chin though, not a full wrapping beard. But we do need to have more understanding and communication about this, and I think the latest Cleopatra debacle that they came out with, trying to show that the ancient Egyptians were Bantu people somehow, but then also went as far as to make Pompey, Cleopatra's father, a Bantu, and then turn around and make her a Bantu also. Why not? And there's a lot of backlash to that. In fact, Egypt has outlawed the movie there or they're not even going to allow something foolish like that to be shown, and especially if you try to call it a documentary. Will Smith's wife was given a lot of money and apparently a lot of backing to try to make something about sub-Saharan black queens. And the second one out the gate she tries is we was Egyptians, we was even Cleopatra. It has the lowest ratings ever on any show that's ever been shown on Netflix now. The Rotten Tomatoes score is the worst ever from what I understand. Yeah. Kevin Smith, the comedian, was supposed to have a concert in Cairo or something, and they got wind that he had said that we was the Egyptians, and they told him, no, here's all your money back. Don't even come to Egypt with that idea. So maybe we can have a conversation about this, because he puts, of course, a yes in the black and a no in the Caucasian situation. Let's take a look at what the spread on the numbers has been so far. You know he's an Afrocentric, but this might show you also how bad this is with all of this, for he has 614 replies and over 5,800 votes. It says right there above Eddie's head. So I vote no, because I'm guessing that he's trying to act like if West Sub-Saharan Bantu type people that didn't know Egypt existed should have a say-so in what Egypt's portrayed like, because it's in Africa. They have that possessive feeling like they should claim the Khoisan, the Pygmies, ancient North Africa, everybody but themselves. And so we have this issue where they keep claiming it. It was hilarious when I was on Chief X's channel, and somebody that actually is in the Horn, has family that's been in the Horn for generations after generations, was on, and he actually told that misinformation man to quit saying we and pointing at them as if they're related or even knew they existed. And he was all like, oh yeah, just trying to play it off real quick. It's not something to be played off, though. Apparently some of these people are tired of this situations. I've shown a recent series of videos here where they are not just claiming Egypt. That is their main key point. The secondary key point is to try to claim they were the people out of the Bible, and that it's not Caucasian religion. It's actually somehow West Sub-Saharan Bantu people that aren't mentioned in the book, didn't know it existed whatsoever, and aren't a part of it. But due to slavery, they were given that book by the Jewish slave masters, and somehow the cargo cult thing kicked in, and now they have this issue that they're not involved. And you can see it in modern day pandering, where we constantly pander to them that they have to be involved. We'll even take something like Little Mermaid, make her black, or Hannibal and the elephants of the Alps and so on, and we'll try to make him black. Or Achilles, we'll even try to say that when they say Achilles is blonde in the literature. So they almost expect it now. You should be pandering to me. And meanwhile, they're cocky and talking all this crap like, this is us, this is our history, this is something that we had something to do with. And again, West Sub-Saharans didn't know Egypt existed, and aren't related to anybody that did. The only people that would have would be the Nubian type people and the latter Kushites that come out of that. But if you look up viceroys of Kush, you'll see who ruled over them at the time that came up into question and what they actually say exactly in that article. It doesn't mean a hill of beans to West Sub-Saharan Bantus, because that's not them they're talking about. It's another dark-skinned people that they aren't related to. Just like the dark-skinned islanders and people of Fiji, or the dark-skinned people in Australia, or South India that they aren't related to whatsoever either. But they want to pretend it's all a black and white world, and they've got this war against white people because they're jealous. They created everything in front of you. I've done this a few times now, but somebody put down in the comments anything that you find around you. Look around and find something that's not created by Caucasians. And through a series of things that add up. So, let's have an understanding. Well, do Africans have a say in how ancient Egyptians are portrayed? Again, that depends on whether you're trying to say, would a West Sub-Saharan Bantu have any say-so on what the Caucasian Egyptians were portrayed as? My answer is no, because we already know that they want to portray them as black people as opposed to exactly what the DNA and all history and everything shows. It's pathetic that we're going through this. But I have a feeling, I had a feeling at first that once it came out about it that they would shut up due to humility and embarrassment. But it seems like all they've decided to do is double down on dumb, if you've been paying attention. That they can't let it go because then they'll just be a pre-Neolithic people that owe Caucasians for everything that they have or even want to have, like cool shoes or that cool car or things like that. Well, that's still always in effect. Are they trying to pretend that it's not? It's a crazy thing here. Let's look at a couple of comments and then we'll go look at some pictures and see if we can decide what these people were. So my comment here I put in is, do you mean Sub-Saharan or West Sub-Saharan, or the endemic Caucasians that named Africa and Kemet, Egypt? Somebody thumbed up it. The guy below him tells you there's a time in cinema and television where whites only portrayed indigenous people. You know, like Genghis Khan was portrayed by John Wayne. Well, that's because we didn't have Mongolian actors or anybody we wanted to put in that spot. Just like when we did Cleopatra, and they could have picked a slightly homey looking girl as opposed to Liz Taylor, but they chose because they had her on marks and her draw at the box office and everything to insert her there. Was that a little insensitive? Not really, but then Cleopatra, even in her art, has shown that she had a big hook nose and so on, and everybody says, well, she wasn't like a 10 or anything. She was, it was more about her intrigue was that she was so intelligent. She spoke 6 languages, including the language of the troglodytes. That would be your Nubian type people. But was one of the first ones to actually learn Egyptian out of the Ptolemies, so they really weren't involved in it in any way. But in that new Cleopatra thing, they want to act like it was. And I don't know if you've heard, but their big encouragement and their verification that made them want to do this, regardless of the millions of articles and things that have been shown about Cleopatra and the Egyptians, was some black lady, while she was learning about the Egyptians and Cleopatra and so on, had her grandma, who is not a teacher, but she is a racist, turned around and claimed that supposedly she said, I don't care what they teach you in school, Cleopatra was black. And therefore we have this self-exposing expose here where they're trying to claim, well, we was black. We was in Egypt. It's past pathetic. So people playing people of color and so on and everything, and Al Jolson, oh, if you want to bring it all up, like that gives you power somehow, try desperately, but it'll also show you that, well, the ones that, if you look at the black people they did back then, they weren't speaking too well and so on. It's funny, even when whites did caricatures of that, it was usually a little bit better enunciated so the audience could pay attention and understand. Yeah, there was a period of time there, but let's not go there. So she's seen many episodes of the British detective show, The Avengers, where a white actor was played by an Asian person. And it wasn't that long ago, where a white actor was played by an Asian person. You mean Oriental? An Oriental was on the show, but they acted like he's just Jim Johnson? Or were they trying to play him off as an Oriental person? Because that would be a mistake. You know, it's not like we make something like Mulan and then we take all the slanted eyes off people and make them look like Caucasians. But I tell you, blacks would really like to paint the world as black. Recently, I've shown you quite a few where they claim the Greeks. Believe it or not. They claim the endemic North Africans. They realize they have to do that because if North Africa was always Caucasians along with the Mediterranean and Egypt, well, that just ruins their whole lie, doesn't it? So they try to claim that they used to be the endemic people of above the Sahara somehow, which is never going to be true, never was true. And it's self-exposing whenever you don't want to be who you were. Let's just do a pretend experiment here real quick. Let's say we go ahead and agree with your lie. Now, you still came from West Sub-Saharan Africa and the Ivory Coast and didn't know any of this that we're talking about existed. So it means nothing. And if you look into your history, which we'll do here in a second, it shows you that you don't want that history. You want to lie about it. Oh, David Carradine played a Shaolin monk in Kung Fu and so on. Well, you know, I think he did a pretty good job of looking like somebody that was at least half Oriental, if not more. The guy below says, I think modern Africans should have a say-so in how Egyptians are portrayed. It's obviously a portrayal of their history. There's still so much to know, and the shame things that we don't know to be true are still denied, even by the so-called experts in the field. This is one reason why your channel is so important, that you can teach my child the truth. So she's going to lie to her child like that lady did and start saying Cleopatra was black, and it's all a conspiracy. With that cargo cult mentality, saying, oh, it's all a conspiracy. We weren't West Sub-Saharan Bantus that are pre-Neolithic and still unable to really function good in society. We were the people that heralded civilization, those Caucasian white people. Yeah. It was hilarious whenever the DNA came out. I'm not going to look any more of these. When the DNA came out and it said, well, one of the weird things here on it is they were watching to see if it changed over time, because towards the end of the Middle Kingdom and on, the Egyptians got overwhelmed by a few different people, and then the Persians and the Greek and the Romans, and they wanted to see if there was any change that went there. But that's also code for the idea, we're going to look at this and see if there's any blacks changed into white somehow, or anything. We're going to find anything in that. And what they found, there was continuity, constant continuity. And in that constant continuity, I showed in a recent video that actually shows Egyptologist Seving tearing somebody up with their own information. But it was back from like 1936, whenever they were studying just craniometry, didn't have DNA yet or anything. And they talk about how the rulers of Egypt starting it out were a Nordic type head. They're talking about brachycephaly and diencephalitic head shapes and this, that, and the other, and who was it that did it. And then it kicked back in at the time of Queen Tai here, Akhenaten, the 18th dynasty, basically King Tut, everybody that you know about that. But right after that too, and apparently still in effect in his words, are Seti and Ramses and so on like that too. But what we were looking at a minute ago for the first half of the video, or whatever percentage it's going to be, was Eddie Murphy. And if you've ever watched the video, Magic Johnson comes up and goes, "Oh, great Ramses." So he's actually supposed to be Ramses, the red-headed guy. And they try to give you a depiction of Queen Ty, and they show you things like this on the left and say she must have been black like that, and then they look at the mummy and her hair, and it's like, no, no, no. Of course, genetics are done on her, and they go, no, definitely not. But definitely not like this. In fact, that statue's made out of yew wood, and yew wood darkens over time just like a pine fence does. And everybody's listening has seen a brand new wooden fence and how light yellowish tan that is, which is the color they used on women whenever they did them in any form of art. Sure, sometimes they're done in a red ochre color too. What they're never drawn as is a black person. So even looking at this kind of ambiguous, like, the best that you get out of it is somebody who looked about like this. But that's giving an ethnicity to the Caucasian Egyptians that wasn't in effect with Negroid admix and so on until much later. So a Mediterranean woman, because the genetics has shown that these people are Mediterranean, early Anatolian people, and the closest analogy today is modern Europeans. They put it in that way. They literally say ancient Anatolians and modern Europeans. We could look at so many of these different depictions, but this is all going to be about Queen Ty. So I'm going to look at a few depictions. If you've been on the channel, forgive me. You've probably already seen these. But I'm just going to look up blue-eyed Egyptians. Blue-eyed Egyptians. Now you'd imagine that you'd get somebody traveling in Egypt or all kinds of things from putting just that in there. But in reality, what you'll get is crystal blue-eyed Egyptian statues from the earliest dynasties. These are the people that are in the pyramid building dynasties. Here they are. Males like Imhotep here, shown with crystal blue eyes, but right here is going to be drawn a little darker, and sure, you can get somebody a little bit more red ochre and so on off of it. But males are red ochre, females are pale. How does that happen to a black person whenever we're looking at a Caucasian phenotype? It's simple to see. Blacks will hear that and then turn around and go, no, there's this darker picture on a wall and it makes me think something. And it's like, oh, if he was a little darker, does that all of a sudden make him not a Caucasian? Would it ever make him suddenly a West Sub-Saharan Bantu? Right. But there are quite a few of these statues in the earliest of dynasties, and then it peters out about the 8th dynasty, and then there's some little showing in the 12th dynasty, and then we get to see Nefertiti here shown that still has one blue eye left. It's hard to catch the gaze because they have a layer of wax over the top of it as opposed to straight cleaned up like the ones we were looking at. So you have to get at an angle where it's refracting the light out. The other eye is gone, but this eye is a crystal blue eye also. But there's a lot more to be shown, and it's not like they snuck in somewhere. This is actually 2 statues that they have from the Naqada II period, showing you a blue-eyed people. They've said this is probably the gods or a prominent person, or it may have been what they considered the king at the time. Yeah. So there's all of that. And of course, people don't want to go with the idea that blue-eyed Caucasians were in Egypt, but what did the Egyptians show themselves? Then again, we can look also at Sumerian depictions here, and you see the same thing. So whenever that idea that's in your Bible where Noah gets out of a boat in the Caucasus Mountains in Ararat and spreads out 3 different ways, one of them to Samaria and India and so on, the other ones north is Japheth, and then Hamites come in and take over the bottom part of the Levant up into North Africa and the Egypt, you'd probably realize that you can find people that will have that trade there. Even still to this day you can, but not as much as apparently was in elder times, and especially in the nobility. All these scribes are basically from nobility, so you get that idea. So let's look at something here which a lot of Afrocentrics have never seen, is this idea of reserve heads. I just put in the words reserve heads up there. I didn't even put in Egypt or anything, just reserve heads. What are these? These are reserve heads they had for the nobility all the way until the first intermediate period. So before, during, and after the building of the pyramids and stuff and the founding of Egypt, yeah. And so you can imagine whenever you look at these and how it looks in their phenotype, what we're actually looking at here. These Caucasian Egyptians that founded Egypt, built pyramids, and so on. Even on Chief X's channel, I said you kind of understand by looking at these pictures why the people said, hey, they look Nordic to me, and he agreed with me. And I was going to kind of play with him and tug at his drawers on the idea of, well, you keep saying they weren't black, but they weren't white. And so I was going to run him through about 5 or 6 things and go, okay, now tell me they weren't white again. Here's blonde-haired people. Here's crystal blue-eyed people. What did the DNA say? And who's the closest relatives of King Tut? But you want to go back on that? Maybe they were white people. Did they have a tan? Oh boy. Well, they show on the walls red ochre males, but they show also pale females. If she could possibly get that pale, guess who? And it's not uncommon, because all over the Middle East, around the Mediterranean, everybody pretty much showed red ochre males and pale females. There's a thing that went along with that whole idea of being able to have civilization where you have farming and things like that, and the woman can be inside and no longer has to toil. And so she could possibly keep herself pale. The only issues that we have with that is that black people can't keep themselves pale at all. There's no iconography towards that idea. I typed in the wrong thing, but here I'm trying to look at Ramses the Great. Here's a depiction of what Ramses would have looked like round about 92 years old as he passed away. Well, he's gray-haired there. Yeah, well, they tested it and they said he was a redhead in youth, or something that would have looked kind of like what they made it back to look like in his coffin, which was a yellow stain type thing that's on there. And so it looks almost strawberry blonde, apparently to the color of his youth here, which I don't think we'll be able to see it in this picture here. Yeah, you can make it out that it's that reddish blonde hair over there on the right hand side here. That's Ramses. So I guess we're going back to your question again. Should West Sub-Saharan Bantus have any say-so in what the Egyptian are portrayed as? Because these are the Egyptians, and we already know what you want to try to portray them as. Here he is with what I call blonde hair. They say it's red because it's got that dye stuff that's on it, because he was gray-headed at the time. But then they checked it out. They said he was naturally a redhead, not necessarily a blonde. Although we're just one little pigment shade away, and there's a lot of looks between platinum blonde and somebody who's got a brassy type hair that's real dishwater blonde or dirty blonde as they call it and so on. More of a brassy type look. So enough on Ramses there with those just couple of pictures. I don't care what you think you can show on a piece of artwork that outdoes the fact of, like, here's his body, he's a Caucasian, he's got red hair. Stop it. So now we want to look at black people as a different variation on that truth as to what's going on there. So now we're going to go to Wiki. Oh, I don't want to hear you whine. The stuff down there in the bottom of Wiki, this is Afro-Asiatic languages I'm looking at here, but we're going to go away from that. Although that linguistics, I have a video coming out on, shows you it coming into Africa, so it's heavy on the Asiatic, but then they use Semitic languages and other things out there, so it actually takes over Arabia in North Africa and the Berber languages and stuff that goes on there, and that's how it stays and retained. West Sub-Saharan Bantus don't have that type of language, or linguistic type even. Neither do the Nilotics and so on that are in there. But now we're going to look at Asillar Man on the way out the door. Oh. So here's Asillar Man. And he's a late Stone Age skeleton discovered by Theodore Monod, blah, 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 blah. Let's go to the second category here, because I'll take this down just a hair. The Asillar specimen has been dated to around 6400 BP, that's 4400 BC, making it no older than the Holocene. Well, the Holocene's the end of the last ice age, and so definitely not 4400 BC is not 10,500 BC or farther. So along with such fossils as Iwuliru and Ishango, which were excavated from archaeological sites in West and Central Africa, Asillar is the earliest known anatomical modern human skeletons with a negroid phenotype of sub-Saharan Africa. Older fossils with a similar morphology have also found near Khartoum, dating between 8 and 5000 BC. Well, there's a few more of them, but let's just look at every one before Asillar Man. Why do they point it out, and then why do they say it's the earliest modern form of it? So we can look at Iwuliru here that they wanted you to pinpoint at it. It's the oldest one that we've got here so far, but what does it end up looking like? Well, Asillar Man is a small, 4 foot tall, football headed, still extant hominid like Homo erectus. Small brain. This is the way that it looks basically for anybody. Before that dating. All of the other ones that they show you, you can look them up. Look up Iwuliru yourself right here that it's showing you here. And it's a small brain hominid. And then they were admixed by somebody who has E1B1 genetics, and that small brain turned into a larger brain case at around 4400 BC, and they apparently took over and spread it throughout the Bantu type people. Other type things like this had happened with the Khoisan previously, and with all the Nilotic types, even Bantu, even the Nubian type, as we would call them, they have admix. Everyone basically does. Even the people that we call Ethiopians today, which I made a video about recently, showing you that the original Ethiopians were at the far east and the far western world where the sun rises and sets, and they're sunburnt because of that. Sunburnt faces doesn't mean black people. They changed it into that in post-Herodotus' times. Yeah, but don't worry about that. If you're West Sub-Saharan Bantu, you're not related to and never knew the dark-skinned people that we call Ethiopians today existed. And they weren't the famed Ethiopians ever. Even on Herodotus' map, you can find a place where they show these leuco-Ethiops. What's that? It's the white Ethiopians. That's what it means, leuco-Ethiops. Well, what is that? You can just look that up here on Wiki. It'll show it to you. So what does that mean? Well, they are at the far west of the world, and they're supposed to be tan. But then whenever they went there to see these people, they didn't exist. In fact, it was real white people, so they call them leuco-Ethiops. Oh, I don't know. Let's just show you that real quick. They don't look Ethiopians, but you just spell it with Ethiopians with an A. Oh, now they just call them white Ethiopians right here. White Ethiopians, which you see listed here is the leuco-Ethiops. And where are they at? Well, they're here across North Africa and here. Yeah. The Garamantes, Guitans, people in the area of Morocco and so on. That's that. Yeah. So we don't want to hear any more we was North African Caucasians, because it's so self-exposing whenever you go, we were someone else. It's very immature and childish. Very self-exposing. And you're sitting there trying to act cocky and say something about it, and you can imagine to everybody else just how pathetic it looks. Should West Sub-Saharan Bantus have any say-so on the way the Egyptians are portrayed? No, definitely not. Definitely not. I question whether they should even be allowed to portray Bantus in anything if we ever show it, because if we ever did a remake of Tarzan but race swapped, oh, wouldn't that be hilarious? But if we did anything that had to do with Bantus and they tried to make themselves a lot more advanced than they really were at the time of showing, that would be not acceptable. Just like in the Dahomey and the Woman King, where they tried to play off the idea that they weren't perhaps slavers. In fact, it was against the colonizers that were trying to get you to stop enslaving people. An exact opposite of how they want to dream that this went down somehow. Didn't go down that way at all. Blacks were capturing their own kind and selling them off for beads and alcohol like a drive-through slave mart. You'd like a better history. We should have had one. You can go back into Africa and try to make one. Anything you do under America is up under the Caucasian wing, where they've been teaching you generation after generation, and then finally you were able to do this because of being taught by Caucasians and constantly around them. Which you can see that they want to stay. In 2019, they came up with this idea, well, that's 400 years of slavery, and it's like slavery's been over for a long time. I mean, it was outlawed in 1807. We only started out in 1776. So what are you talking about? Oh, well, the slaves lasted on until 1856. So now we're looking at 90-something years. Well, they call it 400. They want to look at like in the Bible where somebody went into captivity for 400 years. Deuteronomy's already happened, people, to the Caucasians that are listed in the Bible. But when they tried to pull that idea, all these countries made their little Hawaiian luau setups and everything for the people when they show up off the planes, and nobody went. They'd rather be around those racist white people they just can't stand. But they sit around all day long thinking about jealously and making up shit like, it was our ancestors that did this. Our ancestors built the pyramid. You ought to see my video if you haven't yet on cargo cults. It explains, well, not why, that's still unknown, but in a flinch maneuver, how they come up with the idea that these people that showed up with all this advanced stuff stole it from your ancestors. It's real self-exposing. Anyhow, I'm outie, guys. I think that's enough on this. Again, one more time, let me know in the comments here what y'all think. Should West Sub-Saharans have any say-so on what the Caucasian Egyptians look like? Should blue-eyed Caucasians have a say-so on what the Egyptians are portrayed like? The people that named Africa. For what we didn't look at it on that map there, but it was all called Libya before it became named Africa. Both of those instances, it was named by endemic Caucasians. Peace.